We all know the tech industry moves fast, and keeping up with personal and professional development, especially while managing a full-time job, can feel overwhelming. In this video, I'll share my strategies for balancing work, study, and life so you can keep learning and growing without ever feeling burned out or resentful. Hi everyone, I'm Marina. I'm an applied scientist at Amazon with too many interests. Over the years, I've learned a lot of strategies for managing having too much going on. I've had to because in the last 6 years, I've transitioned into machine learning from a non-technical background, gotten a master's degree, learned 2 languages, become a certified personal trainer, and now I'm getting a second master's degree. And I promise I've actually had a life, had time for hobbies and relationships, and enjoyed the process. My goal is that at the end of this video, you'll have the tools you need to be clear about your objectives, develop strong study habits, and create a system for lifelong learning that both supports your professional development and allows you to have a life you'll actually enjoy. Let's get started. The first thing you need to do is get clear on why you even want to do this. A lot of the time, we set study goals because we feel like we have to or we just should. And while it's true that getting and staying ahead in competitive fields like tech does require a lot of investment on your part, if you're only doing it because you feel like you have to, it's not going to be enjoyable and it's definitely not going to be sustainable. A tool I like to use is the 5 whys. It's super simple. You just ask yourself why 5 times until you get really clear on your actual deeper reasons or emotions. For me, it might go something like this. Why do I want to study every day? Because I want to keep improving my skills. Why do I want to keep improving my skills? Because I want to stay competitive in my field. Why do I want to stay competitive in my field? Because I want to advance my career and take on more challenging projects. Why do I want to do this? Because I want to be financially secure. Why do I want to be financially secure? Because I want to be able to take care of my friends and family. So now I'm not just studying because I should. I have a deeper motivation and a deeper reason for doing this. I'm studying because it aligns with a purpose that's greater than just me, and that's really motivating for me. Once you know why you're doing this, you can start working on implementing a routine that will help make studying stick. Here's an important mindset shift that in kind of like a roundabout way can make studying feel a little bit less painful, in my opinion. I think a lot of the time it's easy to imagine studying as just like this thing you have to get through for a short phase of your life until you finally made it and you can quit and just relax. But the fact is that's probably never gonna happen for a couple of reasons. The first is if you work in a competitive field, you're probably never going to be done learning. Even if you land your dream job, the field is going to evolve and you're going to need to evolve with it. Even if you do end up in a position where you've learned enough for your job, there's always going to be something worth learning. Maybe it's not anything to do with your job. Maybe it's a language or an instrument, something completely different. As long as there's a possibility you're going to be curious about something, there's always an opportunity to have learning be a part of your life. If instead of learning feels like this checklist item that you just have to get through, it becomes a part of your identity, it's a lot easier for this to be something enjoyable to do on a regular basis. If you just identify deeply as someone who is curious, who wants to learn, who's excited about learning new things, it becomes a lot more fun. This also means that there isn't really an end goal. Learning itself is the goal, or the process is the goal. It's kind of the same thing as if you've ever been on like a fitness journey. If you approach it as, I just need to get through this crash diet for the next few months and then I can go back to normal, definitely not going to stick. You're going to have to implement changes to your lifestyle and your routine that you implement for the long term. Otherwise, it was all kind of wasted. In general, viewing my study habits this way has also helped me reduce stress because I don't feel like there's such a strict timeline. I don't need to rush. I just focus on doing a little bit every day, and I know that over time, that adds up to meaningful change. So I know you might be listening to me right now and going like, yeah, sure, sounds great in theory, but in reality, I'm not going to convince myself that learning is so fun when I would rather be on social media or hang out with my friends or playing video games, which would be fair. Here, I also have a couple of thoughts. The first is, if you never enjoy studying your subject, it might be a hint that you're not in the right field for you. On the other hand, if you never enjoy studying at all, it might mean that you need to work on systems to help you focus better. Let's tackle the first issue. Say you're studying machine learning. You always find the theory part really super duper boring because you just like building systems. It might be that a more data science-y role isn't for you and you should switch your focus to being more on ML ops or a pure machine learning engineer role. That's going to allow you to study things that are actually fun for you and not get so much into the nitty-gritty of the math, for example. If you're struggling with your studies but feeling energized by learning other things, it could be a hint, something you should take notice of. Of course, sometimes we're going to have to learn something boring because it's a fundamental part of something more interesting. We have to just kind of get through it. That's obviously going to be the case sometimes. But if we're just never feeling it when we're doing our machine learning homework, that's probably a sign that we should do a little bit more exploration. On the other hand, if it's always challenging to focus no matter what you're trying to learn, then we might need to develop some better habits and systems to make this a little easier. Two things are really important for this. We need to learn how to manage both our energy and our attention. Think of your attention span as a budget. Just like a budget for your household income or whatever the case may be. You have a limited amount to spend every day. And just like with money, if you're not intentional about where it goes, it's easy for it to disappear quickly, often even not on things that even have a good return on investment for you. Just like when making a budget, first thing to think about is how you're currently spending your attention time. Think about your typical day. Do you know exactly where your time is going? Or do you find yourself losing chunks of it to things like social media or video games and you didn't even realize it at the time? When you get swept up on something you didn't intentionally choose, you're missing opportunities to use your attention on more meaningful activities. It's a good idea to regularly take stock of how you're actually spending your time and attention and think critically about whether that's moving you towards your goals or at least enriching your life in some way. It's also important to consider whether the things we're giving our attention to give us an energy boost or an energy drain. For me, if I find myself accidentally scrolling for 30 minutes, that doesn't really feel like a break, and afterwards I actually find it harder to focus. But on the other hand, if I'm going to spend some time with friends, even though that might take more time out of my day, I feel a lot more recharged and better able to focus later in the day or even the next day. Same idea with a workout. Maybe that's something that can help you feel a little more energized afterwards. Or maybe it's something that makes you feel a little bit drained afterwards. You need to have an understanding of how different things in your life affect your attention and energy budget so that you can plan accordingly throughout your day. These activities that drain your energy have another problem too. They literally make it harder to enjoy doing hard things. So for example, if you're always getting those easy dopamine hits from social media, it's not as fun to do your homework. In a way, we kind of need to train ourselves to enjoy doing these more challenging tasks to get our dopamine hits and not kind of give ourselves these easy outs to get the same satisfaction without any work or benefit to ourselves. Ideally, it's best to avoid these kind of distractions altogether. If you can get rid of social media on your phone and just check Instagram on desktop like an old lady like me, that can do a lot of good. Alternatively, if you want to keep it on your phone but just keep your phone out of reach, that totally works too. Or maybe you keep these more easily satisfying and less difficult to accomplish dopamine hits just after you've done the hard stuff later in the day. You might also find that there are different times of day that work better for you to do different kinds of tasks. For me, I am a super duper morning person. If I have something that is technically challenging, I need to do it right away, first thing in the morning. I'm really effective until about noon, and then I can manage until about 3, and then my brain is mashed potatoes. So I just have to be aware of that. If I have something really difficult to do at work, I need to plan that early in the day. I might move my workout into the afternoon if it's something very important so that I make sure to use those really key hours for me in the morning. Similarly, I can also make sure that I have planned anything that is less cognitively demanding or maybe something a little more creative and less technical that I can do in the afternoon when I'm still kind of awake but not at my full capacity. Afternoons and evenings are also great for tasks that allow me to kind of turn my brain off completely, like cleaning the house. If I were to clean the house at 7 a.m., that's kind of a missed opportunity for me because I'm not using my good brain hours when I need them. So it's always better to plan these things that are kind of easy for me later in the day, and that allows me to get a lot more done without any more time. When it's time to take a break from challenging tasks, it's really important to make sure that these breaks are intentional. Your goal is to recharge completely, take an actual break, and come in refreshed when it's time to get started again. Maybe for you, you get that kind of recharge from just scrolling on your phone or reading a book for a little bit. But for a lot of people, I find that it's really nice to go take a walk, be outside, completely separate from the environment that you normally work in, or do something social. So if you have the opportunity to call a friend or, talk to your roommate, that can be really helpful too. Whatever it is, just be mindful that whatever you're doing is going to make it easier to work again, not harder. So for example, if I'm reading a book that I really like, I can't use that as a break because then it's going to be super hard for me to put the book down and go back to doing my homework because I just want to read the book. So I have to keep more engaging stuff for after I've done my difficult tasks, more like a reward. Once you have a clear understanding of your energy rhythms, the kind of tasks that recharge you, what time of day works for you better than others, it's a lot easier to plan a schedule that works. The key here is consistency over perfection. Said another way, systems are more important than specific goals. It's not really about achieving a certain outcome every day, but about building habits that allow us to automatically do the tasks that add up to long-term progress, even though we're just making little incremental changes each day. Our goal is to build a system that is so on autopilot that we don't even think about it. We are able to save our brain power for actually important things throughout the day, and allows us to develop the skills that make our success in the long term basically inevitable. I like to plan my learning both on a weekly basis and kind of longer term. So in a given week, I might say that on Tuesday from 8 to 9 a.m., I'm going to do chapter 9 of this book. It's a little more specific. I make sure to have that time blocked off on my calendar, and I have pretty clear objectives for each day. That being said, I also definitely allow some flexibility. If there's a meeting I have to do during that time or something, that's fine, no big deal. I'll just shift it to another day. But I like to have general goals for when I plan to accomplish everything. I also usually have kind of an outline of what I plan to learn for the next few months. Right now I'm in school, so it's really easy. It's whatever the assignment is what I'm going to be working on. But I also have plans for kind of things I'll need to catch up on during the break to prepare for the next semester and that kind of thing. And prior to this, I would have just things I was interested in and a running list and kind of a little bit of a timeline for when I wanted to get to each of them. I know for some people, rigid schedules like read this from 8 to 9 a.m. can feel really stressful. So that's fine, just learn what works for you. If you'd rather have smaller, more general goals like read a chapter of this technical book this week, that totally works too. Like I said, the goal is consistency, however that works best for you. Now let's say you have a goal to study for an hour each day. How do you actually make this happen? A lot of us like the idea of working hard a lot more than we actually like working hard, which makes sense because working hard is hard. So what we need to do is make sure we're never just relying on willpower, but instead, like I mentioned before, we need to have strong systems and habits in place. Basically, what we want to do is design our schedule and environment so that the default behavior is what we actually want to be doing. The more frictionless you make the process, the better your chances of sticking to it. One thing that's been really effective for me is habit stacking. Basically, the idea here is if you already have a habit you do consistently, just add another habit on top. So for example, maybe every morning you really look forward to having your morning coffee. This is something you do religiously every day. It's on autopilot. You don't have to think about it. What you could do is just put your book next to your coffee setup, and that way you're reminded to just read a chapter every day after you have your coffee. Adding a habit into an existing routine is a lot easier than trying to build these moments throughout your day where they don't already naturally exist. Another thing is to make sure your habits are really easy to access. So the coffee example is a good one here. If we make sure the book is right out in plain view, it's very easy to remember we need to do it. It's a lot harder if we keep our technical books all in a little bookshelf, out of sight, out of mind. Or, for example, if you're working on an online course, maybe you just make sure to have that tab open when you close your computer for the night, so the next day it's the first thing you see and you're just straight away reminded that that's what you wanted to do. You can also use an app or something to help you build these little intentional moments. So I have a little habit tracker app that pops up a reminder at 8 a.m. to take my vitamins or study or whatever the case may be. It's not something I feel like I have to do right away, right when the little icon pops up, but it does kind of sit there nagging me until I do it, which is pretty effective for me. Just like we want to make our positive habits easy to reach, we also want to make distractions hard to reach. So we can kind of apply the same thing, but in reverse. So while I would have my study book next to my coffee, I might make sure that my phone is out of the room if I find myself constantly checking it during study time. Then, when it's time to take a break, the simple act of going to another room to check my phone can kind of do what I was talking about before, where I feel like I'm having a real disconnect from studying and I can actually reset for a moment and then get back to it, rather than just kind of sitting here and scrolling for a little bit before I just get right back to studying, and then it's easier to fall back into the cycle of being distracted and not actually fully committing to the study time. Another tool that can help you stick to a study routine is just to make it harder to skip. So one thing you can do here is basically add like layers of commitment that make you feel responsible to other people so that you feel a little bit guilty if you don't want to study that day. So that could be something like you could live stream your study sessions, you could have a study buddy, you could have a reading group, something like that where you have a bit of accountability to others can make a big difference. Lastly, everything becomes easier when you prioritize your physical and mental health. It's really easy to overlook the impact that your physical and mental well-being can have on your ability to study and focus, but it is so critical. If you're exercising regularly, eating well, and sleeping well, you are absolutely going to be more productive, energetic, and focused. Not to mention in a better mood and more likely to enjoy what you're doing. Even something like a short walk or a 20-minute yoga session, whatever works for you, can be really super duper helpful for enhancing that mental clarity that you need. We all know we should eat healthier, but this is also important for your performance in work and study too. So eating a generally less processed diet with a lot of omega-3s, lots of vegetables, not a ton of sugar, not a ton of caffeine. These things can make a big difference too. And of course, sleep is crucial. Don't need me to tell you that studies have consistently shown that better sleep is associated with improved cognitive function, memory, mood, improvements in the gym, basically everything. We also need to make sure to take care of our mental health with practices that can help us manage all the stress that we're kind of going to put ourselves in by having a full-time job in a challenging field and really pushing ourselves to continue to improve even on top of that. One of the best tools for this is absolutely meditation. Meditation is great because not only is it going to help you calm your mind, develop a better mindset for productivity, and generally just feel better, but it's also literally training yourself how to focus when things are boring. If you get really good at sitting in silence and directing your mental energy, even when it is not super engaging, that is like a superpower when you need to read a really boring book. If you're new to meditation, I recommend starting small, even just like 5 minutes. Personally, I find that just sitting in silence and really kind of doing a little bit of inner focus is the best approach for me, but that can be really hard to get started with. If you're looking for something that's a little more guided, I actually have a second channel where I post guided meditations, and that can be kind of a nice intro. I also have several that are kind of like pep talks if you ever need a bit of a motivation boost. Before we wrap up, I just want to reiterate that all of this, the studying, the habit building, the time management, it's not just about being able to check off a box. It's about connecting to your purpose for learning. When you get clear on why you're doing this, whether it's to further your career, support your family, or just for the love of learning, it becomes a lot easier to use that purpose as initial motivation that allows you to build habits that sustain you even when that motivation wanes. And remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about being consistent. Whether it's studying for half an hour a day, building better systems, or even just taking better care of yourself, these little actions can build up over the long term for substantial change. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a thumbs up. If you found any of these strategies helpful, let me know in the comments. See you next time.